Hi, everyone. Thanks very much for coming. It's great to see so many people out. It is 7 p.m., and I will call this meeting now to order. I just want to acknowledge everybody for attending here this evening in person, as well as thanking all who may be joining in online. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land upon which we gather today is the ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We pay our respects to the indigenous Mi'kmaq people of this territory, past, present, and future. We have quite an interesting and exciting presentation for us this evening, as this is an engagement session to deal with our official plan and zoning and development bylaw. I'd just like to indicate that if you would like to formally provide feedback on our draft official plan or zoning and development bylaw, there are several ways to share your comments. For those who are attending here in person, there will be the opportunity to share your feedback directly tonight following our presentation. There are also multiple ways to share your thoughts on the town's Shape Stratford website, either through submitting comments on the interactive draft zoning map or by filling out the online feedback form. Also, comments can be submitted by email to consultation@townofstratford.ca or by calling the community hotline at 902-423-0649, extension 103. I understand if you call at the right times, Mayor Steve Ogden may pick up the phone. All comments must be received by 11:59 p.m. on Sunday, July the 12th, 2026. Please note, though, that comments shared on our social media platforms, though always eloquent, are not considered formal submissions and will not be included as part of the official feedback process. After the amendment has been, or not the amendment, but the presentation tonight, there will be the open floor for any questions or comments. Questions via social media are going to be monitored and entered into the record as best we can. To ask a question via social media, please use the comment field on either our YouTube or Facebook sites where you are viewing the live stream. As this is a public meeting, you are required to provide your name and address when asking a question. Now, I just want to lay out some of the ground rules that we'd like to have in place for this meeting this evening. I will just indicate that we request and expect that everyone here will be respectful of one another and be patient and allow each other time to speak and to respond. To keep the meeting running in a smooth and orderly fashion, I'd like to indicate the comments and presentations ought to focus on the nature of the merits or the likely consequences of any potential impact that this proposed official plan or zoning development might have, and not on the personalities or the motives of the presenters. All comments or questions ought to be made to myself as chair, and I will then decide who is best capable of answering those questions. We're not going to have direct debate between members of the audience or those between the audience and the presenters. I'm going to ask that because we have a full house here, and I imagine there's a few people who want to provide their perspectives on the official plan, that we will limit things to a few minutes for individuals, or if there's groups, we'll allow for some more time. And certainly, we want to get to as many people as possible, but if we do find we have some more time at the end, and there are people who have additional insights or comments or questions to ask, then we will certainly invite you to do so at that time. So I'd just like to present a summary of why we're here, although I don't think it's any mystery for anybody. This is our official plan and zoning and development bylaw, a proposed amendment. Under the PEI Planning Act, it has a robust framework for how planning ought to be conducted within this province. And it also vests within a municipality the privilege and the responsibilities to govern land use planning services under that municipality. And certainly, as a duly constituted municipality, Stratford does take that on within the boundaries of our town. We must do so through the development of our official plan and land use bylaw that are going to be approved at the end of the day, both by council and our provincial government. The official plan itself creates a vision for the use of the land in the municipality. It directs the use of land in the future based on considerations such as physical space, social factors, our environmental conditions, and the economic effects of past, existing, and projected land use and development trends. Through policies, maps, and tools for its implementation, an official plan addresses matters such as the protection of resources, protects our natural areas, it governs the location of housing, community facilities, commercial offices, and industrial activities. And it also regulates the need for essential services such as water supply, sewage disposal, roads, and parks. Then the land use bylaw provides for the day-to-day implementation of the official plan. If the official plan essentially is our grand vision of where we're going, the zoning development bylaw is how we get there. They contain the requirements that must be met for land use and development to occur in the municipality, as well as the processes that the municipality follows to decide whether or not proposed land use or development will allow it to meet the priorities of its official plan. For instance, a land use bylaw might address such matters as the types of land uses, the types of massing and development and buildings that might be permitted or restricted in a certain location, the standards that apply to each type of land use and development, such as wastewater management, such as agricultural landscaping, the criteria to consider different types of applications for land use or development, and the processes and requirements according to which applications are assessed. Under the Planning Act, under Section 15.1, the council of a municipality has to review its official plan and bylaws at intervals of not more than 5 years, and shall then by resolution confirm or amend them, and where the official plan and bylaws are made or last reviewed more than 3 years before the date on which that official plan comes into force, then the council has to review them within 3 years of that date. Currently, our official plan was last comprehensively reviewed in 2014, and the zoning and development bylaw was last comprehensively reviewed in 2019. So suffice to say, we are both long overdue for review under the required timelines under the Planning Act. Beginning in July 10th, 2024, Council awarded Upland Planning and Design the contract to undertake our review and development of the town's new official plan, zoning and development bylaw. And I can state without any doubt, folks, that they have been valuable partners to us as a municipality. They have been extensively involved in engagement as well as the creation of multiple drafts, and they've been very patient and very generous partners with us here at the town. Our official kickoff began on September 23rd, 2024. Since that date, Upland has been reviewing existing bylaws. They've been engaging with the public. They've been engaging with the business community as well as developers. They've been conducting surveys and hosting public meetings. In October of 2025, Upland presented a draft official plan and zoning development bylaw at 2 in-person public open houses and 1 online presentation. The results of all of that engagement and more ongoing conversations and with council and town staff and residents have led us to now this most recent draft presented this evening and available online. Under the Planning Act, there is a requirement that the public have input as well in the form of a public meeting. And the Planning Act states, before recommending to the council the adoption of an official plan or any review of an official plan, the planning board shall give an opportunity to residents and other interested persons to make representations. So that's what we are here to do tonight, to hold at least one public meeting. We have published that notice in the Guardian newspaper on June 6th and June 20th, as well. Notifications of the online public engagement and the public meeting have been shared on the town's social media pages. So I want to thank you all for your attendance here this evening. I know for many of you, this isn't the first time that you've engaged throughout this process. I look out into the audience and I see many familiar faces, and your steadfast participation in this process has certainly led us to where we are here today. And certainly we thank you very much as engaged citizens for continuing to research, to take the time to review everything, to ask good questions, and to provide follow-up to council, to staff, as well as our consultants. I would now take the opportunity to ask Ian Watson and Ryan McLean of Upland to present their summary of the proposed official plan and the zoning and development bylaw.
All right, thank you, Councillor McDonald, and good evening, everyone. My name is Ian Watson. I'm senior planner and partner with Upland Planning and Design. I'm joined by my colleague Ryan here, who will be taking notes and can chime in on any questions about engagement or anything like that, and also my colleague Carmen at the back, who's been helping out as well. So this is the second draft engagement, as Councillor McDonald said. For those of you who have participated previously, this is a little more formal than previous engagements because this is the kind of official community meeting that's required under the Act, so there are certain procedures that go along with it. On the side. Oh, I gotta slide the slide, I see. Turn it on, that helps. There we go. So I'm gonna, I know you wanna give feedback. We're trying to balance communicating changes and updates to you, as well as making lots of time for everybody in the audience to have their feedback. So I'll try and balance that well as best I can. But tonight, just want to give a bit of an update on where we're at so far in terms of this process. I know some of you may be joining for the first time, so giving that context. And then really tonight, I want to focus on the key changes from the first draft. We heard a lot of really good feedback, a lot of really heartfelt feedback on those first draft documents. And so we've worked with your planning committee, with your council, to figure out how we're going to respond to that feedback, what changes to make to these documents, and really want to highlight those changes to you. I won't go over every little every change of word or anything like that. There are fact sheets, there's copies out there, they're available on the project website that really basically speak to every change that's been made, so you can track those along. I will also try and hit the highlights of what's in these documents in case someone is joining us for the first time and you don't know what any of this is about. And then and then we'll talk about the next steps, where we go from here. So, the project, as Councillor McDonald has said, has been going on for 2 years now, essentially. We launched officially at Fall Fest in September 2024. There was a first round of kind of broad visioning engagement, talking about, who are we as a community and what's our vision for the future? What are the key issues that need to be talked about as part of this process? And then in the early winter 2025, there was a series of issues and options workshops talking about topics like housing, commercial development, environmental protection, essentially roundtable discussions on here are key issues that these plans need to address. How do we want to address them? So we got a lot of really good direction and feedback through that process, and we took what we heard from that and said, okay, here's what people are telling us about what we need to do for the future. Let's turn this into some draft documents. So we came up with a draft official plan and a draft zoning and development bylaw, and brought those out in this fall past. And as I said, lots of really great feedback, a lot of participation and heartfelt feedback. So we've been responding to that, or working through that feedback and updating the drafts in response. So we are here at that second draft engagement. The documents are still a draft at this point. I really do want to emphasize that. We started big, kind of big picture visioning for the future, and we've gotten more specific, and we're getting more kind of baked in stone sort of thing, but they are very much drafts. The whole point of this meeting is to have that opportunity for representations on the drafts before council considers adopting them. So, there may be further changes that come out of this process. These drafts will then go to planning committee for a recommendation to council, and then the potential adoption process over the summer. So, purpose today, as I said, is to understand those key changes, learn why these changes were made and how they respond to your feedback, and then an opportunity to share your thoughts. So I'll preface this to say, I guess, is one of the big things in these documents, in that official plan, is it sets out the vision for the future of Stratford. And essentially everything we do in these documents is working towards this vision. And this came out of those early engagements on who are we and who do we want to be as a community. So I'll read it out. It's a lot of words. The town of Stratford is a vibrant, self-sufficient community offering a well-connected network of green spaces and family-friendly amenities. We envision a future focused on sustainable development with accessible public and active transportation facilities, diverse housing options that meet the needs of residents and newcomers, and a thriving local business community. The town celebrates its agricultural roots, and small town charm will continue to blossom into a full-service community with all the essential amenities that residents need, from healthcare to education, close to home. Thoughtfully planned and inclusive, it will be a place where residents of all ages feel safe, connected, and proud to live. I think what this is really getting at, you see it that Stratford has been growing. It's been coming into its own as a full-service town, and this official plan needs to respond to that and provide the framework for how that development happens. So I'll do this kind of on a topic-by-topic basis, and the first one I want to talk about is the residential zones. I think this is the topic area where we had the most feedback in the last round of engagement, so there's been quite a few changes here to respond to that. First, start off with some of the big moves to celebrate, and these aren't necessarily changes from the last draft. These are things that these documents are going, achieve even in the first draft. But these are things that we want to celebrate and point out as big changes when it comes to residential planning in Stratford. So the first is that there is now a new waterfront mixed-use zone, and this actually is already in place through a kind of interim process that happened last year. So the whole kind of gateway to Stratford has new zoning that allows for mixed-use development, kind of a new gateway to town. We've put a lot of work into simplifying the residential zoning structure. So the current planning documents, they have a lot of residential zones with kind of minor differences among them. It can be very hard to look at a zoning map and say, what's going to go next to me? What can I do with my land? So we've put a lot of work into trying to simplify that, make it clear, make it understandable. Another big change with the proposed documents is the removal of the sustainable subdivision overlay. And I shouldn't say that this is something to celebrate. That this was a zone, or an overlay rather, that allowed the developer to do extra density if they met sustainability goals. In theory, it was a great idea. It was very complex in administration. It was very hard to understand for neighboring landowners. What could that mean in terms of what's next to me? So we've taken a lot of the elements of the sustainable subdivision overlay, the pieces that, the goals of it to have a sustainable community. We've turned those into other aspects of the document and removed the overlay itself to make things more clear and streamlined. The documents also broadly permit accessory dwelling units. So whether that's a basement apartment or a backyard suite for a family member or as a rental, kind of that low intensity extra housing options. But one of the key things is also that Stratford is implementing a new short-term rental bylaw to control things like Airbnbs, VRBOs, those sorts of things. And one of the key elements is that accessory dwelling units cannot be used as a short-term rental. So really they are meant to be for housing. One thing that I do want to mention is that, these plan reviews that we do in theory every 5 years, they are meant to be holistic. They're meant to look at the whole town as a whole. Make major changes to the planning documents where warranted. But that doesn't mean you don't do amendments in the interim. You have people come in for rezonings, that sort of thing. So we have clarified the zoning map. We've got all these residential zones clarified, but that doesn't mean that someone, you may, for a year from now, 2 years from now, sort of thing, you may get a notification that that landowner has applied to change the zoning, and there's a process for that, and more meetings like this. So this doesn't set it in stone, but it sets a framework for development. So a big change, I guess to summarize the big changes with residential zoning in these drafts is dialing it back a fair bit. The first draft had a lot of changes that were promoting density and intensification in residential areas. We heard a lot of concern about that, and so these drafts dial it back a fair bit, especially in the application of these zones. Oh, I'm pushing buttons in two places. Here we go. Sorry about that. And I'll show those changes, but one new implementation is this, or new element is this narrower lot residential zone, RN zone, which is new in this draft, and I'll talk about that in a second. But you can see here, there's 5 residential zones compared to, I can't remember how many in the current zoning and development bylaw, a lot more. We've tried to simplify it a fair bit. So to go through what these zones do, I guess the first and certainly the largest by area is the low-density residential zone, RL zone. And the purpose of the zone is to support Stratford's traditional low-density neighborhood character while allowing for a more sustainable and efficient pattern of residential development over time. And so that would be all these areas in cream on the map here. And we did get feedback, so this zone existed in the last draft, and we did get some feedback on it. The last draft proposed smaller lot sizes of 500 square meters, which compared to the existing R1 zone, where it's 700 square meters. We heard concerns about that shrinking of lot sizes, so this draft, the RL zone, reinstates that 700 square meters. Oh, I've done it again, sorry. For lot size, and also increases the lot frontage, so that's how wide your lot has to be, to 22 meters, going back to those standards that exist in the R1 zone. We did hear concerns also about, so the RL zone essentially applies to areas that are currently zoned R1 or R1L, which are the unserviced areas. And we heard concerns from some of those R1L areas about, well, the lot sizes in this proposed zone are quite a bit smaller than what's in my area. What I want to point out there is that in those unserviced areas, the provincial subdivision standards for on-site services apply. They override these smaller lot sizes. So if you're on septic, you have to get provincial approval and your lots have to be much bigger. So even though the zone itself says 700 square meters, if you don't have sewer in the ground or water, central water, it's actually those provincial standards that override. So really what these smaller lot sizes are for in these unserviced areas is if the town ever extends services, sewer, water, at that point, then it's, well, those services cost money. We want to have the density of development to pay for them. And so then those smaller lot sizes kick in. But as long as, you know, on those unserviced areas, nothing changes otherwise. Another key change is in regard to double dwellings. So the previous draft, double dwellings, duplexes, semis, whatever you want to call them, were a permitted use in the proposed RL zone. That has now been changed to a special permit use. So that's the process where it comes to council, there's a public meeting, all those sorts of things. And that's more consistent with the current R1 zone. There's also been a number of areas where there was a lot of interest in the zone that was applied, where we've actually changed the zoning on the property, and I'll point those out as we go forward. So as I mentioned, there is a new zone in this draft, which is the narrower lot residential zone, RN. And this zone, again, is to provide for more compact forms of low-density residential development on undeveloped land. So continuing to recognize that, oh, I've done it, yeah, thank you. You're keeping my eye on me. Is recognizing, you know, there's still that demand for singles and doubles. That's kind of larger home option. But if we shrink the size of the lot a little bit, you can use the services more effectively, the roads, the sewer, the water, reduce the cost of lots a little bit, and make for a slightly more affordable housing option to improve access to lower density housing in Stratford. This zone is very limitedly applied right now. There aren't that many lands within Stratford that are zoned residential that are undeveloped currently, so we've applied it to a few of them. These are undeveloped residential lands that are currently zoned residential in this RN zone. Both buttons, there we go. So yeah, we did hear that, you know, that push for, you know, gentle density, I'll call it, where it's still ground-oriented housing, it's still single homes, it's still duplexes, just a little smaller, it's slightly denser, a little more affordable, and the RN zone is intended to respond to that kind of balancing of those different factors. One of the key things with the RN zone, we did hear a lot of concern about that transition for density. You know, you have your established neighborhood, you have your single homes. If we're going to have duplexes or homes on smaller lots, wanting to have that transition so that existing areas know what's going next to them. So there is a provision that where an RN zone abuts, so touches up against an existing RL area, that's single homes, that you'd have to, the next home would also have to be a single, essentially providing a little buffer before you transition to other types of development. I think that's the key thing. The RN zone allows singles, doubles, and then townhouses can be considered as a special permit use. So again, it's that council process, it's that public process, and it would only be up to 4 townhouses in a block. And again, it would be that public process. The RM, residential medium density 1 zone. So this zone did exist in the previous draft. It's intended to provide a transition. Again, you know, kind of that's kind of the theme of all of this, is we have these existing established areas. We want to transition as we go up to higher density areas. So the RM1's kind of that next step up, providing us to transition between lower density neighborhoods and more intensive areas. This zone has been dialed back a fair bit from the last draft. There was concerns about increased density from townhouses, stacked townhouses, multi-unit housing. This draft, we have removed permission for multi-unit dwellings, apartment buildings, would not be permitted in the RM1 zone in this as currently proposed. Stacked townhouses, so that's one townhouse above another, have been limited to 6 units, and again, moved to that special permit use, that public process where it goes to a public meeting. And also, buffer requirements have been added, a big wide green buffer between these areas and existing neighborhoods. And then finally, the RM2 zone, the residential medium density 2 zone. This is kind of the next step up in terms of density. The zone itself there's some minor changes that I'll touch on, but what was really changed in the zone is the application of it. The previous draft had large areas of RM2 in Mason Road and Flourish Heights and other areas of town. We've drastically reduced the amount of areas where that RM2 zone is applied. Essentially, these areas here are existing neighborhoods primarily that are zoned either that sustainable subdivision overlay or a zone that's called PERD, or there's other zones that allowed a similar type of development. They're now in here. Mostly the new developed areas where the RM2 would be is here, essentially adjacent to the community campus. So the idea is there's this massive public amenity that would be great to live next to, and also we want to have people who are going to use it living next to it, so allowing for some slightly higher densities of housing in the area of that campus. In terms of tweaks to the zone itself, we've increased frontage requirements a little bit, introduced buffering requirements, and reduced some of the scale of townhouses that are permitted as well. But again, as I said, the key change actually is just reducing the areas where we've applied this RM2 zone. And then the final residential zone is the high density zone, residential high density RH. It's intended to accommodate a broader range of medium and higher density forms of housing, such as apartment buildings. It's essentially, this is a zone that we haven't pre-applied anywhere. It's attached to existing of that forms of development, Ducks Landing, that sort of thing. And then it would be one that would be considered in the future through rezoning. If someone had a proposal, they would come through that rezoning process to consider this zone. So there's only minor caps or minor changes in this zone. We did hear concerns about traffic congestion, parking, that sort of thing. So there are now a limit on the size of townhouses, or a number of townhouses, I suppose, in a block of townhouses in this zone. It was previously unlimited. This draft caps it at 12 units or 6 stacks. We did hear in the last round a lot of questions about whether zoning changes, what the impact of that is on housing affordability. We did hear concerns about that piece on short-term rentals and how the loss of housing to short-term rentals could affect housing availability. So as I mentioned, the town is rolling out a new short-term rental bylaw that's intended to limit some of those concerns. Also relating to housing, there are some minor tweaks. These are a little technical, but expanding policies related to future planning if the town expands its boundaries. The town there are unincorporated areas, and some guidance around, if the town were to expand in the future, what does that look like? Has been kind of set out in the official plan. And then some minor technical changes related to the agricultural reserve areas. Next topic is environment, climate change, and sustainability. This was another, I think after housing, this is probably the topic where we heard the most comments in the last draft. Again, going back to that vision, wanting Stratford to be a sustainable community. So strong support for protecting trees, wetlands, shorelines, wildlife habitat, that sort of things, and concerns about clear cutting and interest in stronger environmental protection. So some big moves to celebrate in this. In getting rid of that sustainable subdivision overlay, one of the concerns was how do we make sure we get key ecological lands to be set aside, buffers to existing neighborhoods, that sort of thing. So there's now a mechanism for ecological protection schemes where the town can allow lands to be protected. There's a new O2 zone, environmental protection zone that applies to sensitive habitats. We've buffed up tree planting requirements, bicycle parking requirements. There's guidance in the plan for preserving the existing agricultural lands for as long as possible. Again, there's a recognition that realistically those lands probably will, the lands within the town will end up developed someday, you know, if the town keeps growing the way it has. And with some of the changes to the housing, you know, where we're not putting as much density in the existing areas, we could see those agricultural lands develop sooner, but essentially setting up guidance for preserving them as long as possible, and that when they are developed, how that is done, being very thoughtful about not impacting existing agriculture as much as possible, being thoughtful about servicing, being thoughtful about the types of development that happen in there, so a framework for that. We've updated coastal and inland flood mapping. You know, climate change is a concern, and making sure we're resilient to that. Making sure that in those areas that vulnerable uses such as nursing homes, that sort of thing, are prohibited. Having a minimum coastal elevation for development, again, to deal with flooding, coastal flooding. I won't touch on all of these, but essentially to say that we've done a lot of work on the environmental side, adding objectives and policies related to the environment, recognizing nature-based solutions for coastal development, putting in planning support for, or policy support for a future tree bylaw, those sorts of things, clarifying the discussion around coastal erosion. Adding policy to support source water protection, so the municipality's drinking water wells, having policy support to protect them from impacts. And what else is high on here? Having the ability to require coastal hazard assessments for any coastal development. This is kind of an interesting one. Public land dedication. So as part of a subdivision, traditionally the developer would give land for a public park or some sort of public purpose. We've added language that could be used for natural preservation, that, you know, if there's an important natural environment, that is actually a valid public purpose to protect that natural land. Transportation, infrastructure, and public realm. We heard concerns about traffic congestion, road safety, parking pressure, support for active transportation infrastructure, so sidewalks, trails, bike connections, and concerns about sewage or infrastructure capacity. You know, that the sewer, the water, stormwater, making sure that's being thought about as part of these planning processes, and that's one of the reasons we do these planning documents, where we set this framework or this blueprint for our community, where we establish zoning, where we know where different densities of development are going to go, because that allows the town to plan for those things, to say, okay, this box, this area could support this many units of development. We need to budget to upgrade the sewer or the water or the roads or whatever it is that's required. So some of the big moves to celebrate in these documents is aligning high-level parks, transportation, and public infrastructure goals. Again, thinking about that big picture. How do these all fit together with development and making sure it's all supporting one another? We've strengthened the parkland dedication standards. So again, when a subdivision happens, making sure that the land that's dedicated for public purposes is actually fulfilling public purposes, that it's good land that meets the town's needs. We've established an architectural control overlay in some of the core areas of town that you know, deal with the aesthetics and designs of the buildings. Have stronger regulations for pedestrian protection. This is a big one in parking lots, that sort of thing, making sure that there's a safe place for people to walk. And then recognizing, we heard a lot about transit and the desire for stronger transit in Stratford, so having policy recognizing those goals and working towards future transit investments. Some key things here. These drafts expand bicycle parking requirements. Previously, they were limited into what types of uses they were required for, so this has been expanded to more types of uses. Added lighting requirements for pedestrian entrances, and added public amenity spaces for multi-unit dwellings. Commercial uses, economic development, and mixed-use areas. So we heard a lot of, I think to kind of offset or kind of as a counterbalance to the concerns in the housing area, housing topics, we heard a lot of support for directing future growth and higher density development to mixed-use areas, commercial corridors, and the town core. So, saying, okay, density is okay as long as it's in these core areas. And as part of that, creating more walkable, complete communities, having those services, those commercial uses that make Stratford a place where you can meet all your daily needs in one place. So some big moves to celebrate here is that, as I mentioned, that waterfront mixed-use zone, that is could be transformational, I suppose, for the gateway to Stratford, coming off the bridge there, allowing a mix of residential and commercial development, encouraging kind of that, I guess, very, dare I say, almost European kind of urban feel that where you can walk and get your groceries and that sort of thing. Simplifying the commercial zoning, there's a new general mixed-use zone that applies to stretches of the Trans-Canada Highway that allows, again, kind of a mix of commercial and residential. Expanded the use of form-based approaches. So this was kind of introduced in Stratford with the grey group lands in the core mixed-use areas and urban core. And the idea being that, we really want to focus on the form of buildings and make sure they're thoughtful and are contributing to the overall, I guess, design of Stratford. And so we've kind of expanded that approach to the general mixed-use areas. We've taken a hard look at the business park and industrial areas, the M1 and M2 zones. And, these lands are lands that are very limited. They're hemmed in. There's not much room for growth in terms of the business park. So how can we use that land to its fullest for its intended purpose? So looking at the uses that are permitted in those areas, and if it's use that can be somewhere else, if it can be on the waterfront, doesn't need to be in the business park taking up that land. So trying to refine that business park zoning a little bit. Some small tweaks in the most recent draft. Just adding automotive service as a special permit use in the waterfront mixed use areas, expanding business park zone policy guidance for commercial uses. Nothing major here, I don't think. Also looking at, so the business park zone in this latest draft expands a little bit, allowing accommodations, offices, and medical clinics as special permit uses. Considering restaurants and lounges as an accessory use in the public and institutional zone. Anything else that's major? And then, yeah, as I mentioned, that short-term rental piece is, I think, a major piece of work, and really updating those provisions in the bylaw to align with the work that's been done on that. And then finally, the administration, development process, and definitions. A lot of work. I was talking to someone earlier tonight about, trying to understand these bylaws. It's a lot. Yeah, they're very legal documents. They're very intended to be precise and technical. We want them to be as usable, and so you can look at this and see what could happen in my community. So we put a lot of work into updating these documents to be clearer, to be easier to administer, to have clear processes, to be transparent. We heard a lot about that, transparency. Concerns about communication, transparency, and accountability in the planning process. Challenges with it being difficult to understand. Desire for greater accountability and clearer communication. It's my hope that these documents help move that forward. So We put, there's some big moves to celebrate here, having clear requirements for applications and the processes that those go through, reducing the number of zones, as I mentioned, having fewer special permit uses. On one hand, that's a public process. It's a very participatory process, but it's also a very unclear process, or not unclear, but I guess the outcome is unclear in the sense that you can't look and say what's going to be next to me. So we want to be clearer on, you can look at the zoning next to you and see what's possible. Moved a lot of the day-to-day responsibility of administering these documents to the development officer, and that frees council up to think about the bigger picture decisions and not worry about the administrative stuff. A lot of more clear language around variances, when you can get one, when you cannot, and the process for it. Making sure we have definitions for everything and everything's precise and clear. Again, really trying to make these usable documents. They're still technical documents at the end of the day. They have to be defendable if you go to the board or that sort of thing, but we want them to be as accessible as they can be in the context. So in the most recent draft, buffered up references to other plans and strategies that the town has, added a summary of what we heard in that Phase 3 engagement, making sure that there's policy support to actually fund the administration of these bylaws, added some more considerations that council should think about is when evaluating development proposals. Again, added some more clarity around processes and timelines for things. Added restrictions on shipping containers outside of the industrial and agricultural zones. And added a whole bunch of new definitions for things like EV charging, catering uses, institutional uses, and some minor tweaks to garages, accessory buildings, that sort of thing. So that's a lot. I'm already gone on long. I could have gone in much more detail, but well, I want to hear from you. So I won't. All to say is next steps. Tonight is that formal public meeting, as Councillor McDonald said. So I'll shortly stop talking, and you have many opportunities or options for providing your feedback here tonight. There's the actual, there's the URL, shape.townofstratford.ca/project/official-plan. As Councillor McDonald said, you can email us. That QR code will take you to that website. July 12th, we said, for feedback, and then we'll take everything we hear. This will all be reported back to you. Again, that transparency piece, there will be a what we heard report of all of that. That will go to Planning Committee for any potential future changes, or further changes rather, recommendation to Council, and then a potential adoption over the late summer. And then these documents don't actually go to, so they go to the province for review, and then they go into effect once the minister has reviewed them and signed off on them. So that can take a couple of months. So it can be quite a while actually before these would be in effect. I think that's it. So I'll stop talking. Thank you so much. You're very.
A very sincere thank you, Ian. It was a lot because it had to be a lot, and it's been not a short process, as we've indicated. We've been at this for 2 years. We've tried to take as much time as we can, though when it comes down to it and when the rubber hits the road, there is a lot to go over. There's a lot of detail. As you can see, we've sweated the small details. We've thought about the bigger picture as well. We are at the point now in our public meeting where we will open the floor for public comments or presentations. So here's what I'll propose to do. Essentially, I will start on my left of the room. I'll start at the front and work our way back, and then come back up the other side and see how we're doing for time, just so I can try to maintain some order and make sure I'm not missing anybody or skipping anybody. If I've inadvertently skipped over you, please wave your hand. Don't throw things, but just let me see you, and I'll make sure we get to you as soon as we possibly can. So I'll just start on this side of the room, and we'll just try to go in order as best we can. Yes, come on up, please. Yep. And as I did indicate, I'll just ask that everybody state their name and just where their address is so we can capture that for our input.
Sure. Hi. Heidi Paulin, 32 Woodhouse Court. Thank you to the Planning Committee and the Council for having this meeting and all the work. I appreciate all the changes that have been made based on the feedback. I have to say I'm a little disappointed. I feel this is a downgrade from the first version. But I understand that I am one voice, and I would love to see more density. But I do think that at the minimum, getting rid of things like special permit use for double dwellings, I feel that the process ends up being that we'll never see these in some of the RL zones and some of the other zones because there's always so much pushback. So some of those things I feel like should be by right to promote density so that the town can grow. But otherwise, lovely presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So we'll just keep going down the line here. Yes, sir.
Hi, Kerry Taylor, 97 Duffy Road, Stratford. First off, I'd like to thank council, the mayor, and particularly the councils of my area for listening to our concerns on the first draft and taking them seriously. And there's been substantial changes. Not all the changes that we'd like to see yet, but I'm sure we can work our way through it. It's a little bit disappointing. We came and had serious meetings with council and with others, with the Birchwoods group from there. Then to all of a sudden see people, and it says, many residents supported the idea of growth for an RA in undeveloped lands. That's the piece of land that's off the Duffy Road that's owned by the Lewises. And we've got real concerns with what's not being said, okay? You, in your plan, and the town of Stratford has been very good about environmental sustainability. High density, there's a term to high density, right? It's called hardscaping. For people that don't know what hardscaping is, that's the higher density, the more roofs there is, the more pavement there is, the more driveways there is, all that kind of stuff. What that does is cause a significant impact on the environment. And you can AI it, you can do whatever, and you can see the impact that that has. There's no front lawns. When you get water, you're going to have significant drainage issues. That property has a big swale in it. The people that own the private driveway, that's going to have to be dealt with. There's loads of issues with high density. If they preach here that it's environmentally friendly, it isn't. Okay. So that's one of the things I'd like to see discussed further before you bring in a new zone. Unbeknownst to us, again, we come to a meeting, we find out about a new zone that just got developed, right? We'd like to have some more consultation with you. Number two is in back of my house. When this property first came up to be annexed into the town of Stratford, it was annexed with I went to a meeting on it, annexed to be R1, the same as the whole as the other area. Then it came out with the official plan, stacked houses. Everything that you could think of was in there but the kitchen sink, right? Now it's gone to another zone that we never heard tell of. Originally when it came out, it had in back of my house a green space. There's no sign of that green space whatsoever. Let me show you what's in that green space. That's my backyard. You know what they are? Pheasants. In back of my house, where the green space is, I have numerous pheasants. That's what I do. My kids call me the bird man. My grandchildren call me the bird man. There's nothing in this plan It just shows RN. There's nothing to say that that space is green. But when originally, under the annexation, it was supposed to be a green space, right? Another point, and I'm just going to raise these here for the public to understand, and then I'll meet with my councillors and with the mayor and other people to discuss some of this, because I think there is a plan. I do agree that that property is going to be developed. There's no question about that. In developments that I'm involved in, there has to be two entrances and there has to be two entrance exits out for fire. Now, I don't know if that's the case in Stratford or not, where there's one entrance. That property is landlocked, okay? So there is a space. We don't know where, before we can, as the residents of the Duffy Road, and they're not all here, but they all feel the same way. I'm speaking for a lot of them. Before we say that, where are the entrances and exits? You can't get out, you have to come onto the Duffy Road. You're not going to be able to get out onto the main road, right, the Bunbury Road that goes out. So where's the entrances and exits? Is there two? Where are they going, right? So before we, as a residents, decide, that our best interests are being looked after, we'd like to know get some answers to some of these questions. And that's, I'll bring them to another session with my councillors and air those things, and I hope that the planning people will listen to this and understand this. But we're, by saying, yes, we're going to go to a new zone, we're going to put more density in, and have no idea what effect it's going to have in the areas, it's just not right. And I believe because people just don't know our area. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Come on up.
Hi, I'm Melanie McCarthy. I live in the public accessible area of Kepik. Will tell you my address privately due to my work if you want, but not publicly.
Mike, if you don't mind, just towards the end, just grabbing one of our town staff and maybe just providing that.
Yeah.
But I understand, sure. Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to comment on the R1L area. I know it's gone, and that it used to be 1,440 meters squared, and now it's listed that it'll be less than half at 700 meters square. My discussion, obviously I didn't talk with everybody in the area, but people that I have chatted with during this process commented how they moved out to that area it was far from the core, that they looked for that type of space. And I just want to voice that again, because obviously there's a reason for that. So seeing that now that area's minimum size will be less than half is quite a difference. The other thing I wondered then, after I read your second draft, part of it, and I was standing on my back deck looking around, I looked and I thought, so technically now neighbors, I live in the smaller lotted area of the Kepik public area I live in. I'm looking at potentially accessible buildings or little accessory buildings in the backyard now, which people can have, and some people may like this for their children and or parents, et cetera. I get that. But my question is, reading the height of the buildings, these accessory buildings, which when I stood in my backyard, I thought, oh, I could have 5 extra accessory buildings as I'm standing here looking. I don't understand the height description. Because say one of the homes is 2 stories, or one's a bungalow, or one's 3 stories, how does that affect the height of the accessory building that they kind of attach to their existing, I guess it is sewer and or water line into the yard? That's all. So I'm just wondering, am I going to have 2 2-stories?
Right.
Or 5 2-stories? Or?
I'm not sure, Ian, if that's something you can address on a technical basis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So accessory buildings, so that's your garages or anything like that, it's limited to essentially 15 feet, so a story and a half. Accessory dwellings is the same. So if you're building a backyard suite or whatever, it'd be that same 15 feet, or the height of the main dwelling, whichever is less. So if you had a one-story house, the accessory dwelling could only be one story as well.
So if you had a two-story house, you could put a two-story
You could
accessory?
have a story and a half, so 15 feet, which, you know, that's probably one story with a peaked roof sort of thing. And the accessory dwellings are limited to one per lot, so
Yeah, I
one
read that.
backyard suite. Yeah.
Okay, just, thank you.
Thank you. Should we get comment? Yeah.
Hi, Greg Bungay is the name. I live on Duffy Road, again, right next to the... I just have one question. The previous meeting I was here, that section of land behind my place and the section across the road on the other side of the Duffy Road were designated the same, if I'm not mistaken, RM. Now, the area across the road was changed the designation to just an R1. Now, why was that chunk of land behind mine given it a new special designation? I'm just, like, why change that?
Okay, just so I get what you're saying, but just so I can be specific, so just there was a parcel that had been, I think in the previous draft, had been zoned RM1 or RM2.
Yeah, behind my place and the other side of the Duffy Road.
Right, and now, it is now the RN that's proposed.
That's, yeah.
Yeah,
But the other was changed to just R, just residential.
RL in that case.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if that's something that you're able to field, or if I could ask one of our planning staff about that. So this is Scott Carnell, he's our long-range planning specialist with the town.
Yeah, so we did reduce a lot of those areas that were RM, and we looked at some potential areas to have that little increased single-density development over the RL. So that's why we only have a few of those areas. Just there's probably a good opportunity to try and that subdivision with the narrow lot, but it's still a low-density zone.
And what was the reasoning behind that? Like, I'm sorry, I don't get your answer. Why didn't you just leave it R1?
If I might,
Yeah.
the reason I think it was split is because the one that's been shifted to an RL, from what I understand, there's already development happening within that area. But this area, which is shaded yellow in the RN, that's considered to be, you know, greenfield as such, so that it's empty space where new development can occur. And what we didn't want to see was, if we're looking to implement this new RN zone, to have it done in sort of kind of a haphazard or slipshod way, in that it's only going to really work in a place, if anywhere, where all of that zone can be subdivided in the same fashion, if that makes sense. So that's the reason why it was split into the two different zones in this
Yeah.
most recent draft.
It doesn't, but like, and talking to, you know, if you have an abutment against, they're going to have, what is it, limited to single?
I'm unfamiliar. Here we go.
Yeah.
So if a property in the RN zone is abutting an existing RL property, then the only options for the lot that abuts is a single-family home. So again, to address that concern around having higher density in your backyard, you would have only single-family homes abutting it, and then the next lots over could be those double dwellings. But again, the maximum density permitted as of right is double dwelling, and then special permit uses is townhouse maximum of 4 units, and that's a special permit use.
Okay, so basically you're breaking your own rule then, with that piece of land, by having an abutment next to mine limited to a single dwelling. So that really isn't an R1 zone at all. It's an R zone and then an R1 zone. That doesn't make any sense.
You've changed the designation just because of the butts behind my house.
Well, I'm not entirely sure I'm picking up exactly what you're saying. So what we might do, sir, is just maybe even after the meeting, you can show us exactly where we're talking about. And
Yeah,
then
okay, I'm
yeah.
just looking at the special designation for, I know, behind my house, right? You know, don't get me wrong, I got no problem with development, you know. But, I mean, if you're gonna, say, designate this whole section of land as R1, and then saying, okay, but if it's bordering on an R1 residence, then it has to be R1 also. Like, again, anyway,
I take your point, and maybe, yeah, but if you can just stick around towards the end of the meeting, and I'd like to have a chance to talk to you, and just we could see exactly specifically and try to figure that out, just to at least have a good understanding, and then.
well, I thought it was pretty clear, but anyway, I'll hang around. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah.
Can I-
Actually,
Yeah, can I just say something? Or,
yeah.
I think I'm hearing what you're getting at is, so we had talked about, there was a point there where we talked about saying, as a transition to these RL neighborhoods, we should do a little band of RL zoning just down the back there. We had talked about doing that as a transition. The reason we didn't do it that way is that we'd be guessing at how big that RL zoning needed to be, because we don't know how big the lots are yet. So, you know, we could put a little line of RL zoning down the back here, and then the developer could come in and say, well, I want my lots to go further out. And then now you have a lot that has both zones on it. So by doing it this way, in the RL zone, or in the RN zone itself, it kind of, it provided that transition without us having to guess at the end of the day. Yeah.
okay. Yes, sir.
Chad Gallant, I'm on Birchwoods Lane, so I do appreciate the changes that were made. I know it really got our neighborhood in quite an uproar when this first came out. I have a question in regards to the special permits on the RL zone. In that it mentions small power generators, or small power windmills or wind generators. But those are, you know, in the official plan document, it shows up to 50 feet in height. Doesn't talk about any buffer or any kind of distance between those. And then also, tonight I learned about the special development officer position. Does that take the place of, let's say, if someone wants to come in and build, you know, put a windmill on that property, does that just have to go through that one person, or does it have to come to council?
You go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So special permit uses, anything special permit, that is a council process. So that comes to council, it's a public process, there's notification, there's a meeting. You know, it's kind of that, I wouldn't say discretionary so much as additional level of oversight. You still have to, you know, the decision still has to be made on good planning principles, so it's not fully discretionary. But it is that public process and it's that council process. So the small wind turbines would go to council. The main reason that they're in there is that they actually are already permitted in those R1L areas, so those unserviced areas down here that have been brought into the RL zone. So as part of that consideration process, and I have to double check if we have criteria anywhere, but you know, part of that would be looking at, is this an area where it makes sense? You know, down here somewhere where there's space, or is it gonna, this larger structure gonna have an impact? And that would be sort of that part of that conversation at council.
But there's no standard buffer in terms of what you need for space next to a 50-foot
Not off the top of
windmill.
my head, it would be something that would come out of that special permit use process that, you know, you'd look at what's needed, but I can double check, and I think that's a piece of feedback that,
For sure.
yeah.
But if I may on that, you know, if you were to install a power generator such as a wind turbine, our zoning development bylaw would probably be the least of your concerns. It's much more a rigorous and onerous process on the provincial regulatory side than it ever would be on our zoning development bylaw. I'm not saying that as a hand waving away the question or anything like that, but there's a lot of stringent requirements for that type of a structure under both federal and provincial law. And so the zoning thing is there to support the use, but I would think all of those issues surrounding, like buffering or things like that, fall height and things like that. I'll tell you, for instance, that there's conversations that municipalities have about cell phone towers or things of that nature. I know that they have to be constructed in places where basically if they have to have a clear path to fall down into and things of that nature. And so from what I understand, wind turbines would be absolutely no different in that regard. Not to say it's not a concern, okay, and not to say it's not valid, but like I said, I think it would be more stringent on that side of things than our zoning development bylaw would be.
Okay, thank you. I do have one other question, if I may. Back to the RN that my neighbors had brought up. You just bring that up. I'm not sure if spot zoning is still a thing that we consider, because I look at that and it's very limited to where we have in the map. I mean, if I look on the eastern side, it looks like a drop of mustard fell on the map, and now it's called RN. To me, it just doesn't make sense, I guess.
Yeah.
So I just want to leave that up there.
It's a concept, but when we consider spot zoning, we consider it more on like a single lot. That's really what we think about when we think of spot. It could be a small zone, but it would be a contiguous zone for the purpose of our zoning development bylaw.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. All right. I want to try to get to this side of the room. So, sir, right here. Yeah. Come on up.
G'day, Larry Ham from Bunbury. Anyway, just down off Duffy Road or Lane there. Now, you're talking about that piece there, I call it the Boyer property, it's Lewis's because it's been Boyer's for a couple hundred years. Now, you're talking about making that RN, squeezing more places into a smaller lot, right? Where's that water going? First of all, before you answer, I own the property, the ditch and all the fields, or a lot of the fields on that side. She swales down like that. You let that water come my way, my farm fields aren't worth dick all unless you want to start growing ducks. Where's the water, like how are you going to control that water from coming in and flooding me out to start with?
Yeah. So, I mean, what I can say about that is the RN would be the zoning, and any development that happens in there would have to be subject to both the town as well as the province's rules about stormwater.
The RN, I understand this is zoning, but all that's doing is putting more pressure. You're paving more ground, more roads, more driveways. It takes ground to soak up the water. So, like, are you gonna put a berm right at the length of my laneway? Like, not you, but the developer? Like, you can't flood me out to satisfy somebody else. Or I don't think you can. Like, we've owned the property a couple hundred years. We've been there forever. And, it's basically like the Masons here. They've been there forever too. But this concerns me, the water part. Like, that farm field, and it's still farmed. Our property is still farmed. We may as well just write 10 acres off, unless you can stop that water. And then only, you put houses in there, and they were supposed to be big houses and green space at the start of all this. This was back a year or two ago. And you keep condensing and keep condensing. Now, and then you're talking townhouses and all that stuff. Anyway, and you're saying behind Duffy Road, a couple of guys spoke here, they're gonna be just single dwelling. Well, what about my laneway? You're gonna put townhouses along my laneway? I think I should have a say what goes up against my property. And I know I'm not technically in Stratford, but this affects me big time, especially if my fields get flooded out and they're not worth frig all. You understand what I'm saying, or you're not interested?
What we're saying, I'm very interested. There's a lot, so the question is, what are we going to do with your land, or what?
Well, you're not doing anything with my land, but
Yeah.
how are you gonna control this water from coming into my place
And
flooding me out?
right, and all I can say to that is that any kind of development that would happen there would have to be the satisfaction of both provincial engineers as well as our own staff here. I mean, we handle wastewater management and stormwater management all the time throughout the entire town. Last I know, we don't have mass flooding anywhere within the municipality. I mean, I think we do a pretty good job, all things considered.
Yes, maybe in the municipality. I'm not in it. I'm butting up against it. That Boyer field, Lewis's field, comes down like that. The water's coming my way. I can't afford to have it go through my field. That's my ditch and that's my lane. I can't afford you to reroute it down this way in my ditch, because then the field at the end of the road is going to be washed out. You've got to stop that water from coming into me if you're going to do this, because the more houses and stuff, you're crunching them in there. There's nowhere for this stuff to go.
Well, and I, at the risk of sounding a bit like a broken record, all I can tell you, sir, is that any development would have to be within, the stormwater management plan. That had to be specified by an engineer, someone far more qualified to talk about that than I would ever be.
Yeah, okay, I just, maybe I shouldn't even ask these questions.
No,
but I
it's
want to
great.
know what's
No.
going on down
Yeah.
the road, because it affects me big time.
For sure, yeah.
And the same as, just because that's there, you're going to put townhouses up against my lane just because my house isn't butting right up against my lane.
No, look, I mean, it's your livelihood and it's your land. I can
Like,
understand
the next
that,
thing you know, well, you're spreading manure there, you're spraying there.
Yeah, but the best I
And
can tell
that
you.
property we've owned for more than a couple hundred years,
Yeah.
forever.
I mean, the best I could tell you is that it would really depend on what whoever develops that land, what their plans are for it. I mean, the zoning can tell you what it can support in terms of minimums. It doesn't have to be built to the minimum, although we can all expect and appreciate that most developers would try to squeeze as many lots out of that land as they possibly can. But ultimately, it would have to be done in a way that doesn't impact you or your lands or your agricultural operation.
I got one more,
Yeah.
go ahead, you want to say something?
Just to say that regulations don't allow us to do any negative impact to the adjacent neighbors. So any parcel that is up for development, none of that water can leave that parcel. It has to be collected within that parcel and then be fed into the system. Any new municipal subdivisions require a curb and gutter system, so all that water is going to be redirected towards the actual infrastructure that we will put in place. So there's no like dirt roads going in there that have to be a fully infrastructure when they put in the subdivision. So all of that water that's collected from the rooftops will be going directly into the town's municipal services.
No water will come into my place.
No, we have to, they have to be engineered to not do that, and that's a provincial regulation, so that's not something we can just do and say, that's fine. The province will say that
Yeah.
you're going to be impacting the neighbor.
I have one more question, probably have a whole bunch more, but I only got one more. That field, again, I'll call it the Boyer Field, Lewis's Field, whatever you want to call it. You're talking about preserving agriculture land. That field there is agricultural land, it's still farmed to this day. And now you're talking about putting a subdivision in there, because that's what all this is about, proposing for the lots and stuff. And I thought you were wanting to save agriculture land. And that, again, is Boyers, they've been there, well, Boyers don't live there anymore, another couple 100-year-old farm.
It is already zoned for residential, and it is a zone for R1L low density right now. So what we're proposing with the RN is not much more than what it already is permitted. So it's not designated agricultural land. It still may be used as agricultural land, but it's being zoned.
When did it get changed? Just when they swapped land to get the campus?
I guess so.
That's when it was done, right?
Yeah.
Let's be honest, that's when you swapped it and did it, behind closed doors.
I can't-
Basically.
that's
I'm
not-
not blaming you personally, that's not what I mean. I'm saying that swap was a dirty deal.
Thank you, sir. You in the back. You want a Dr. Pepper?
Hi, no, yeah, I might. Jody Jackson, 4 Emily Drive. First of all, I do want to applaud folks for taking some of the advice from residents and making some changes. I think they are good changes. But there are some, I think, and I don't know if you go back to the one where like Strawberry Hill, and I'm going to be like a broken record on this. St. Catharines, Reeves. I mean, we're bringing all those in now. I forget. Like that's yeah. So with that one, I mean, I know the area around Towerwood, Cable Heights, all that stuff was an R2, but it was developed as an R1 essentially with bungalows and a couple of duplexes. But This is probably the third, fourth time this has been before council are pushed forward for densification, and I really struggle with why, and I've always said this, but so that one we've heard from residents in the area before, Strawberry Hill, St. Catharines in that area, that they like the way it was developed. I know it was an R2 in most of that. But what I think you're doing here, if you go forward with this, just to essentially color in that map, and bringing Reeves into it is we talk about the shortage of single-family homes or affordable housing, and I think all that's going to do in the years to come is just encourage demolition of a lot of bungalows. I don't know why you need to do that. We've approved, or you've approved, I guess, 3,200 units with the Crossroads development in the town. Looking at population is declining in the province the last probably 4 or 5 months. I don't know why we need to go to those neighborhoods that are already fully developed, essentially, just for one or two developers on the cross from the Isle spot there. So that's one thing. So I think that's a terrible idea. Current vacancy rate is 2.3%, higher than any other the main municipalities in PEI. I don't know why. We see houses. I'm getting ready to sell my other house we just moved into my in-laws' place that are deceased now. But I'm worried about the values of the houses right now. I know we hear all the time housing values are going to go down. That's not the case in this, but there's been a house up the road from me that's been for sale for a year. There's one right on Stratford Road that just went down by 20%. And just talking to some real estate folks in here, there's not a real shortage of supply right now. So I just want to think about that. The other, a couple other points. So the growth management strategy that some folks like to tout around, 32,000 folks in 2041. I hope the folks that are campaigning this fall let folks know where they are on that, because I don't know too many people that want to see the town at 32,000 people in 15 years. We can't afford to provide infrastructure now. We have a whole bunch of fire extinguishers to nowhere right now on the or fire hydrants, up and down the main drag, but we don't have any in the residential areas that are, especially Ward 2, where they've been looking for years, and it's an insurance issue. It's not all negative. I'm a resident now, and I feel like saying what I want to say. So just besides the mayor and a couple other folks, who does want that 32,000 people? Like I said, if folks are going out the doors in the fall, let folks know. I know I'll be asking folks where they are on that, and how do we think we can afford the infrastructure? I know the province and Minister Evans back there, and I know money's getting tight. We're not seeing infrastructure in areas that desperately need it. We're seeing it in areas that haven't been developed yet. So that's another thing, and just around affordability in general. So I just read Halifax just got rid of their inclusionary housing requirements probably 2 months ago around kind of making sure there's affordable housing in some of these high rises. They said the only ones where it's actually feasible is smaller wooden structures. So that's kind of a real negative. I don't see anything either in the plans or what we've done here that's done anything for affordable housing or seniors housing. So I just hope folks will think about that, but really think about the folks impacted here in Towerwood and St. Catharines, Strawberry Hill, Reeves. I mean, there's folks that are paying more for rent in Reeves than I was paying for a mortgage. That's wrong, but to zone this so that it encourages someone to just, pave over it and put up. We don't need a whole lot more right now. I think what you've done is sufficient, given the next 5 years. As far as out by the high school, I think that's a great idea. If the grade group does what they plan to do, the 3,200 units, that's more than enough to give us 5 years to look at it again. But really take a hard look at that growth management strategy and ask folks not around the table what they think about the numbers. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. I thought I saw a hand. Yes, come on up.
So, Bill Mooney, McLaughlin Drive. And I'd like to say thank you for the change to Flourish Development. It was, if you want to maybe go to the RL slide, that was a big time change. And I do appreciate that because we are, my backyard is the Flourish Development. And just have a question on when the Flourish Development first came in, they promised the residents of McLaughlin Drive a buffer zone before the next housing would be developed. And over this process, we haven't gotten confirmation of that is still in place. Now, I did inquire about that, and then the response was that we do not place recreation and open space zoning on undeveloped private lands. I'm not talking about recreation or open space. I'm talking about just a buffer zone. Basically, it was not meant to be developed as a park or recreation. It was just to be undeveloped space between the back of our lot and the start of the Flourish Development. And I'd like to know if that still is being honored in this whole process or not.
So from what I understand, there was a subdivision agreement that that development was subject to. I believe that it's now expired. So at this point in time, the plans for that land will it'll have to be seen in terms of buffers or green spaces. So. Are you saying that that was an agreement between yourselves and the developer? Or?
No, it was a public consult. It was when the Flourish Development came here, and they said, yeah, this is what we're going to do, and those people on McLaughlin Drive were going to get 50 feet before the next property was developed.
Okay.
And that was the not a sign agreement. That was a public agreement. And I'm just wondering, is that gone by the wayside over the past few years or not?
So like I said, I mean, unfortunately, the subdivision agreement, I believe, has expired, so they're going to have to come back with something different. And that same process that you went through with the first subdivision process, I understand you must have been involved in that. That same process will have to play out again. So that's something that, you know, in your dialogue with the developers, if and when that time comes, you might have to be doing that again. Yeah.
So those things expire. Like we weren't like it was just a form like this. It wasn't like a one-on-one.
Yeah.
I mean, I know you probably weren't there, but we weren't really told that this expires after so many years. This is what This is what was agreed to. And so how we as residents supposed to know that there's a time limit on this, and if it doesn't happen by certain years, it's too bad for you. You got to start the whole process again. Like, how does this get honored to the residents if it can be just abandoned?
Right. So, Mr. McKeegan here, our Director of Planning, I think he has some insight for you on that.
I'd like to give some insight on what's happening, but I can't give too much because what's come through as a revision to the subdivision plan is not public yet. So when a subdivision gets preliminary subdivision approval, it's for 3 years. If it's not renewed in that time period, it expires and has to start again. So I can tell you that going forward, there has been some changes to the proposed subdivision to make that periphery area next to existing properties more compatible. I can't give you much more detail than that because then I'd be crossing the line I shouldn't cross. But I think what you'll see when it comes out public is something that's more workable, more in favor of the adjacent and abutting properties. So that's the best I can say at this point in time. But there has been changes.
And will the process, when it goes back to, will it be a public consultation again?
I can't say that it'll be public because you don't always have to go to public with a subdivision approval depending on the zone it's in and what the requirements are. But at this point in time, let's let it play out as far as where it can become public so that at least you have a chance to see it and respond to it and speak to ourselves in the planning department or councillors or planning committee itself. So, but that's where it's at right now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Yes, we'll go here first, and then I think I saw another hand over here. Yeah, so, yes, ma'am, but just in the back.
Lorene O'Neill, 32 Autumn Lane.
I might ask you, Miss O'Neill, if you just
Yep.
tip the microphone down a little bit, so we can, thank you very much. Yeah.
So 32 Autumn Lane. Looking at this proposals, Hollis Road is now being put through as a thoroughfare, where at the top, it has just the Canada Trail going through. And the proposal was originally for 20 townhomes. And then when you guys looked at it last year, they were thinking about high density, and were looking at putting in apartment buildings and stacked townhouses. And when I came in and I looked at the plan and I went into the planning department and I asked the guy, I said, so what's happening there now? And I said, because my understanding, I've just recently moved here, and I was told there's only 20 townhouses coming up. And now he said, well, no, it's now 90. And because there was only originally supposed to be 20 because of the wetlands there. And now there's 20 on one side, and there's 64 going in on the other side, right where the wetlands are supposed to still be. But apparently there might be some, so the original wetland boundaries have remained unchanged on the provincial registry through to April 2026. Does that mean that those wetland boundaries have all of a sudden been moved back, and now we're putting 90 townhomes up at the top of Hollis instead of the 20 that were supposed to be going there? And like we said, there's been a lot of building along Hollis Road as well, and there's properties for sale that are not moving. And now we're going to inflex it with another 90 townhomes at the top of the road. And then, yes, you're going to put a through road, which now will access that 160 homes will have access to Hollis, so coming down, and then you have your high school. All that traffic coming onto Hollis Road, I'm probably never going to get out of my my lane where I live because there's just going to be so much traffic. And it's just like, I just can't imagine, like right now there's only 24 townhouses at the top of Hollis, and in the next little while there's going to be another 90 and onto wetlands. And from my understanding is the community came together last year, and that it was stopped, and that because they went to you guys, the council, and they went to the news, and they looked at the wetlands and everything else, and now all of a sudden it's come forth again. And the planner who I talked to just says, well, you should be happy there's not apartment buildings going there. And I'm like, well, yeah, but there's 90 townhouses. That's what I just don't understand. So I don't know what you can say to that, so. Or if anyone else has anything to say to that.
Yeah. I keep turning that on and off. So, sorry. So, yes, Mr. McKeegan here as our Director of Planning, he'd probably be able to give you a little insight as to what's going on in that area.
In regards to the wetland, there's been a major study done through a private consulting company for engineering, and that was done in coordination with the province and the Department of Environment. And by doing that, there was a response from the province, Department of Environment, where they said, this is the boundary for the wetland. When the private consultant did the work, that boundary changed, and they used a lot more data involved to basically support that. So when working in coordination with one another, they redefined the boundary for the wetland, which is now based on a more detailed study. So it's been defined, and what's happened on the south side of the road is now that those locations for the proposed townhouses is sitting on land that's not wetland.
Okay, but I mean, we all know that there's, like, if I go to a company and I say, I want to know this, I want this information, there's certain companies that are also going to provide me with information that I want to have. So how do we, like, wetlands don't just move. So that's, like, I mean, it's there. I walk that area all the time.
I understand
It's
where you're coming
there.
from, but I'd like to
But-
think that any legitimate company is not going to risk who they are to do that, but in coordination with the province, who has the master overview of environmentally sensitive areas, and we rely on them in everything we do when it comes to situations like that. So the best answer I can give you is it's gone through a whole lot of scrutiny on this. There's been a lot of discussion, a lot of information, a lot of data generated in order to clearly delineate that wetland area. And I'm not a specialist in
Yeah.
delineating those areas, but I have to rely on those companies, the Department of Environment, the province themselves. When they delineate something, then we have to take their word for it, because we're not going to do a separate study ourselves as a town to do that.
Yeah, but it's sometimes, we always find out after that, oh, oops, that wasn't what it was. But the other thing is the amount of traffic that will change, because now, as it is that the community above us goes, they have, like by Fullerton, they have their exit onto the highway. And now they can either come down Hollis, and there's just going to be so much more traffic there. And there's a lot of kids on that street too, and it's worrisome for the families that move in and the families that are there when you have that much building coming.
Right.
And the connecting road, and then you've got the high school there too. Like, that's a lot of,
Understand. I can appreciate that, but I'll respond to that, okay?
okay.
Again, we don't have the specialists in-house for the major studies that were required for traffic studies or traffic generation kind of thing. So we rely on contacting those who own the roads, and those who own the roads on Prince Edward Island, except for Charlottetown and Summerside, and I think Kensington, is the province. Province owns all public roads. So at any time we have proposed development, we will send the province a schematic or a diagram of what's going on, the number of potential lots, number of units, and they will provide us with a response saying there's no need for a study because the roads can handle that kind of traffic, that kind of number of units, that kind of thing. So in essence, we've done our due diligence by contacting the authority of ownership of the roads who, and I don't see them wanting to overload the roads because it's going to cause damage, and then they're on the hook for the cost of those repairs and those maintenance things. So in fairness to what you're saying, and I appreciate where you're coming from, I don't know much more that we could have done on this except contact the owners of the roads, which is the province, and find out how they feel about it. And we have response on everything.
Yes, but the amount of new buildings coming up is doubling the amount of buildings that are already there, which is,
I can appreciate your concerns, I really can. I guess in retrospect, I mean, all we can do is contact the authority, and they have traffic engineers and things like that on staff, where we don't have those specialists here. So we rely heavily on their comments and any kind of conditions they would want to put on the development.
it's sad, because I think the house right at the edge, like, their house is for sale, and my guess is because they know that 90 townhouses are coming, and they're not going to want to live with that construction. So who else is going to move down that road? And then what else are you going to have? Because, I don't know, there's just a lot of families there, and that's a lot of construction. That's just all I was going to say.
I'll respond to that as well, because just recently we had a discussion in-house about how things are transitioning for residential type dwellings in the town. We're seeing a shift right now in the typical single-family home, the house, towards more multiple unit dwellings. And that's not uncharacteristic in this day and age with affordable housing, what people can afford, what they want. Some people don't want a house for the maintenance costs, everything else goes with it. So there's different variables involved there. But there's definitely a shift going on in Stratford and a lot of other communities across Canada.
Yes.
And the same type of thing happening.
Yes, but those townhouses are not going to be affordable because the ones that are up there are not affordable. $400,000, there's not that many families that are young families that are going to be doing that, but
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyways,
It's
thank
an
you.
awkward time for a lot of people who want to have their own residence, their own home, whether it's a home, whether it's a rental unit, a leased unit, whatever the case is. I'm the first one to admit, it's an awkward time for a lot of people.
But like someone else had said, there's still, at this point in Stratford, there's a lot of empty rentals out there. So, and a lot of empty homes. So then it's like, are you moving too fast is the question.
I'll just say to that point, as you alluded to, there was a request for rezoning of that land to what is now the R3 zone, which is kind of high-density apartments and whatnot. That had been voted against by council. The resolution was defeated. So from what I understand, the developers have now reconfigured their plans to be in accordance with that zone's density, I guess, maximums. And so we can't stop somebody from building something that's permitted as of right in that zone. So that's what this developer is doing as far as I understand after speaking with our professionals in planning, is that they're not doing anything that's outside of the permitted use within that zone. And as Mr. McKeegan noted, just by your apprehensions about the traffic, and they're perfectly valid, we do have to rely on those transit engineers who tell us that the roads can handle and support that type of volume.
Okay.
Thank you. So I see you. Yes, you, yeah.
Hi, Karen Doucette, and I live at 5 Jane Crescent. Just getting back to the very basics. I've lived in Stratford for over 40 years. I've seen it explode, I guess, maybe is a better word. But just getting back to basics of where is all our sewer going to go. When Charlottetown agreed to take on our sewer, waste management, whatever the proper terminology is, Stratford was not this big. And I just want to know what types of discussions have been going on with the city of Charlottetown in terms of our waste management.
Okay, I will let Mr. McKeegan speak to that. I can say, to the best of my understanding, the agreement is for a few more years that we have with the city of Charlottetown, but I'll let Mr. McKeegan speak to the specifics.
Thank you. In going forward, Charlottetown will keep an eye on their capacity and what their system's running at, and at any point in time, they will contact us for further discussion to say, look, we're reaching a certain level of concern, so we have to do something in addition to what's going on now, and there would be enough timeline in there, and hopefully the funds would be there to expand that system that's currently holding everything. So I'm not going to say that I'm not worried about it, because there's always constant communication with our infrastructure team here and the city of Charlottetown. So I would like to think that those discussions are meaningful enough to say, look, we're at a point now we need to do something else or plan for something else down the road in order to accommodate the future growth. So that's my best answer I can give you without being specific on certain things.
So sorry, there is no plan, there's no concrete plan.
Mr.
At this time.
I can't actually say that, I don't know what Charlottetown has. I don't. I mean, I'm with the planning department, and there's an infrastructure department here as well. So going forward, I'm quite certain there's been discussions with infrastructure and Charlottetown at certain points, because you always have to keep tabs on volume and capacity, especially in those systems. And Charlottetown's growing, we're growing, so, and you see they're doing updates sometimes at the Charlottetown plant, so it's something that will be pursued probably more closely to find out what the capacities are and where we go further with this.
Mr. Chair, can I chime in?
Yeah,
as well?
certainly, please.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Watson. Yeah.
Thank you. So we can't speak just for Charlottetown specifically, but one of the things in these planning documents, one of the efforts that we've made in trying to increase certainty, I suppose, moving away from things like the sustainable subdivision overlay, being more specific about what's permitted, is, that's certainty for you and for landowners, but it's also certainty for the decision makers who, when it comes to infrastructure. We can have a better idea of how much development could actually happen. So one of the key things, for example, in the official plan was for all these lands that are currently agriculture and are in the agricultural reserve zone, in putting policy for the future of those lands, we set density targets for them. This is what we kind of expect from a density perspective. Now, when they're having those conversations about what's our future need for sewer, there's more certainty in these documents to say, okay, if we get X number of new people and these lands open up and the density of them is X, how much sewer capacity do we actually need to service that? Like, there is that part of planning for the future is thinking about what could that look like. And I think my hope is that these documents take a big step forward in providing some of that certainty to make those hard and big decisions about infrastructure and setting aside money for infrastructure and all those sorts of things, that there is that data, I guess, to look back at and say, what can we expect? So I hope that's a positive thing that's come out of this process. Yeah.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. It's Susan Satari. I'm also from Autumn Lane and a neighbor of Laureen, who just spoke. I live directly downstream from the wetlands, and I use that term deliberately. It's very, very wet. Last year, we successfully opposed the development of those wetlands based on environmental concerns, and I don't see that this has moved forward at all. Just for clarity, Mr. McKeegan, you mentioned that the wetland was remapped with a lot of additional new data. If I'm not mistaken, that was the developer's engineer who was hired for that remapping, and it was done in November, which is impossible to map a wetland in cold weather. It has to be done in spring and summer when the water is flowing. In addition, the newly defined wetland boundaries, if you're accepting that flawed new mapping, still, the townhouses that are proposed to be developed on that south side are still sitting on the newly mapped area. 24 stacked townhomes are still on your newly mapped area of wetland, according to the maps that we've seen here. So I just don't know how that's necessary or justifiable. This new zoning that's been creatively developed to allow higher density, even though we didn't go to R3, is going to have a significant impact on traffic and the environment in the area. But leaving the north side development of 66 dwellings alone, why do we need the 24 on the other side on environmentally sensitive land? We have seen a lot in the news about provincial remedial moves to correct backlash against developing wetland. There should be new rules coming down the pipe about that. It's essential. And as one previous gentleman said, hardscaping. All of that development and the parking that's going to be needed for there is going to hardscape that wetland. That water has to go somewhere. It's going to continue flowing downhill and flooding. No matter what you say about storm management, I just don't think it's justifiable, and I wonder why we have to do that. Following up on what someone else said about so many available rentals and the gray groups, additional housing coming. Why are we doing that? I just don't think we can justify it for 24 more townhomes. We should be protecting environmentally sensitive land in this province especially. We are so prone to environmental influences and flooding and shrinking of our land and needing to preserve agricultural land as well. I cannot understand Council's agreement to develop an ecologically, environmentally sensitive area that was originally protected. in the Forest Trails original development. And one more thing I'd just like to say, Councillor McDonald, you mentioned that you have no choice but to allow development when zoning permits it, but it is council who permits the rezoning, who votes on the rezoning. You have to do that with your residents and our sensitive land in mind. Developers can only build in a new zone if you allow the new zone to be created. So,
And that's absolutely correct, but this wasn't a new zone that was created. This was the existing zone.
RN1 is not new.
No, it was an R1 with the
Sustainable overlay.
Overlay.
It's not still?
It is.
It is still?
Yeah.
So the end of Hollis developments are not RN, they're still with sustainable overlay, R2 with sustainable overlay.
As of right now, yes.
Even though this proposed density seems to greatly exceed what that originally was intended to allow.
Well, and, not to relitigate things, but part of the rationale for rezoning to the R3, which was the higher density, was actually to impose some more stringent standards on the land in terms of setbacks. One of the, as Mr. Watson noted at the beginning of his presentation thereabouts, he said, he was qualifying his words. He said, but it was somewhat of a highlight that we were getting rid of that sustainable subdivision overlay in the town, because that sustainable subdivision overlay, though well-intentioned, can lead to some outcomes within those zones which seem somewhat at odds with, I think, what that zone might have been intended to be. And in the instance of that new phase of that development, it does permit some fairly significant development as of right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I just wonder, has the province actually signed off on this wetland building that's going forward? Is this, have they approved it?
Mr. McKee, I can't say, I'm not sure, but I don't know if you can.
Yeah, it's my understanding that they have worked with the consultant, and they've said, this is fine, we understand it, we've read it, we approve it, so we wouldn't have gone forward any other way, so. But when you mention holding up development and saying, we've had enough, it's called a moratorium, and that's a very fine line to draw when you do that. I'm not saying it can't be done, and it can typically be done with an interim planning policy when you're doing something else, like an official plan or like some other documents. You will put an interim planning policy in place to accommodate what you feel is needed at that time, and once that document is done, then you flip over back to what you're doing, so.
I'm not advocating a moratorium, but I think there needs to be reconsideration of that parcel of land being developed on at all. I can't see the necessity for 24 more units in the greater scheme of things when it's going to do incredible damage in the long run.
Mr. Chair, can I jump in for a second? So since this is the meeting for the upcoming official plan and zoning and development bylaw, you did mention the RM. So I just want to clarify here. So currently these lands are zoned, they're in that sustainable subdivision overlay, and those are the rules that apply today. If, and they can get permits under that. But if the draft, as drafted now, were to go forward, those lands would, as you said, be in the RM1 zone. And again, to Councillor McDonald's point and my point earlier, there is those challenges with the sustainable subdivision overlay. And so part of the hope with these draft documents is we can't fix the past, but we can at least learn from those and put in more predictable zoning for the future.
Totally understand the need for more, but I think it needs to be done more holistically, not just looking at a single parcel of land, but with a view to what is available all around. Existing housing, empty rentals, places to build other than an environmentally sensitive wetland. So that is really my point.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Hey, Jeff. I wanted to start by saying I think most of us here.
While I know who you are, sir, just for.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Derek Kronemeyer, 79 Williams Gate.
Thank you.
I want to start by saying I think most of us here want the same things, a livable Stratford and one where our own kids can actually afford to live in someday. And I know the people who worked on this plan understand the values of more housing options, and that's why I think the first draft looked the way it did the first way around. The late great Jeremy Crosby told council the second draft would bring both increases and decreases in density. At the Intergovernmental Affairs Committee on January 21st, his words were increased intensification and in some areas and scaling back in others. And that update went to regular council on February 11th. So I went and measured the two public draft maps against each other line by line to see how the balance actually landed. What I found was that it almost entirely scaled back. By my math, the only place the second draft allows more housing than the first is about 5 acres of vacant land near Bunbury Road. In opposition to that, RM2, our main medium-density zone, the one that allows apartment-style multi-unit buildings, was cut from roughly 205 acres to about 75 multi-units. 275 acres. Multi-unit was then removed from RM1 entirely, and the minimum lot size in RL went from 500 to 700 square meters, went from about 500 to 700 square meters across about 1,400 acres. So it's roughly 5 acres up against well over 100 down, with no meaningful increase anywhere to balance it. I understand the second draft was responding to a lot of public feedback, and I respect that. But that's where I'm hoping you can get. But here's what I'm hoping to get you to understand. Gentle density housing forms, such as duplexes and small townhouses that fit right into existing streets, are the most attainable housing there is. It is the only way I was able to afford a home in Stratford. The first draft offered gentle density across the whole town, which town council thought was good enough to bring to the public. So what was the reason for pulling that gentle density back this far with no meaningful increase anywhere to make up for it? Because I think it's worth being honest about what's at stake. Our official plan is from 2014, 12 years old, even though the law requires a review every 5 years. The rules we set now will shape the next 10 to 15 years. Young people have never had a harder time affording a home. If you don't believe me, you need to talk to more young people. So this isn't about a map, it's about whether our next generation can afford to stay in the town they grew up in. And by the time this comes back for review, for a lot of them, it might be too late.
Thank you, sir. As evidenced, though, in many of the comments we've heard here tonight and throughout this process, I'd say your views are certainly respected, is the best I could say. Yeah. Thank you.
But there's no areas where there were any increase?
The best I can say is that we are relying upon our urban core and our general mixed use, our waterfront mixed use, and our core mixed use zones within the core area to really satisfy a lot of that requirement for more affordable built forms to allow people to get a foothold into housing markets. Your concerns are perfectly valid. I respect everything you say. We're doing the best we can, balancing against really the vast majority of the feedback that we've received from the residents in the town. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. We just want to make sure we get to everybody who's not had an opportunity to speak, and then if we're good, then certainly, okay? I just want to make sure that there's nobody else who wants to go. Doesn't look like it, so come on up, Mr. Taylor.
Two comments, actually. One, when Mr. Ham spoke about the water issue, you talked about, retention ponds and stuff like that. The Duffy Road and that area is all ditched. There's no catch basins, there's no water, there's none of that stuff there, right? It's all natural flow, right? So I don't know where that water is going to go. You don't need to answer it. I'm just saying that's what it is, right? But let's seriously look at Stratford. Really look at it, right? Outside of Stratford limits is growing in leaps and bounds. If you go out to Mermaid, Johnson's River, I know of Glenfinning, a big subdivision that just opened out there. Off the Donor Road, there's a big subdivision open there. Off the Mount Herbert Road, it's growing in leaps and bounds, right? Do you know why it's growing in leaps and bounds? It's the best place in the world to live. Do you know why it's the best place in the world to live? You can build a home, right, an affordable home, and you could come to Stratford and get everything for free. They're going to get our community campus, they'll get our soccer fields, they don't pay taxes. We're paying taxes. Why is affordable housing here? It's because we're well over on what we're building for everybody else. And it's our taxpayers' dollars that's doing it, right? So you can say, you people that need affordable housing, yes, you can say make smaller lots and all that, you're still never going to be able to compete with outside this town of Stratford. That's the situation we find ourselves in. Would I move out? The only reason why we're not selling and our neighbors are not selling is because we've got grandchildren that are going to the schools and we're the drop-off place. That's the only reason why we're not selling, right? But that's why, if you look, you ask where young people are, they're outside, going as far as Vernon River. That's where they're going because it's cheaper.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you very much, folks, for all of that very valuable feedback and comments and questions. And as always, they will be incorporated into our next review process. As part of this process, we have received some written responses that I will read into the record as that's a requirement of our of the law. So the first written response: I'm a bit sad to see so much pullback on the initial plan. I recognize I'm in the minority, but Stratford is not embracing enough density, commercial expansion, and whole neighborhood integration. It's baffling to me why there are no or few community bodegas, convenience stores, cafes, etc. We need services spread through neighborhoods to allow for convenience. So much need for driving is a shame. Densification allows us to recruit new and diverse businesses and restaurants, not just more fast food all of the time. And please allow more recreation in our parks, like public access basketball or tennis courts or volleyball sand pits. More space to play, more shelters and picnic tables, even barbecue or fire pits. I would please ask council to take a brave, bold stance and reject kilometers of low-density houses without allowing infill. RL, as modified, is a sad and outdated idea. This does not make for a vibrant living town. Focus on adding vital services to attract people and allow them to build or rent a wide swath of housing with novel and diverse forms. Build a destination to attract the next two generations rather than catering to cautious, conservative mindsets where nothing changes. The world is rapidly evolving. Stratford cannot stay still, stuck in the mud of tradition. Comment 2, hello, I live on Duffy Road. There is no plan to show amount of housing that will be in field behind me that is owned by Scott Lewis, as there is no land number on field at this time on revised plan zoned for small single-family lots and single-family large lot or lots bordering Duffy Road according to colors on revised official. I'm having a hard time because there's no punctuation in this, so I'm trying to breathe into it a little bit here. At original first draft meeting, it was advised that plans for second draft would show full outline to avoid any confusion on second draft that would be presented. Please advise amount of small lots that will be in field plus location of roadways. Thanks.
Mr. McDonald, if I may, when we were here, we're making comments. We do so with our name and our address. Are these anonymous comments? Or?
No, from what I understand, this information is provided to our consultation staff, and the only reason that your names are here so is that we get an idea of who's in the actually in the town. From what I understand, these are all vetted comments from people in the town. There's no secret intelligence program happening here. Yeah.
And make our comments publicly.
Yeah.
I believe it should be identification made to those comments.
I don't have it, is the best I could tell you. I mean, if it's a concern, we might be able to do something to try to figure that out. But I just don't have it with me right now is all. Yeah. Believe me, I'm not withholding anything from you either. I just don't have that information with me right now. Yeah. Okay, comment 4. Disappointed to see the area in Flourish Heights and the Golf Academy land zoned for RM1 instead of RL like the rest of the land that on that side of Kinloch Road. The original plan for Flourish Heights included a 50-feet buffer zone between this piece of land and the existing houses on McLaughlin Drive. We don't see a green space on the map. Will this agreement still be honored? We spoke about that a bit with you, sir. Yeah. Comment 5, in the new plan for RN zoning, stacked townhomes of up to 4 dwellings are permitted at the discretion of council when a special permit is submitted. The change from RM2 to RN is the same as prior, just a change in the name of the zoning. Requesting consideration for the official residential zoning plan to omit stacked townhomes regardless of special permit request. Oh, I might have missed one. Thank you, Mr. McKeegan. I apologize. There's one more. Comment, this was comment 3 actually. Would be very nice to have seen a pool in the community campus. Lane swims are next to impossible for working families with kids. Bella Alliance Center pool is always full. PEI does not have a 50-meter pool, which would be great to host bigger events and such. Okay. I understand that there has not been any comments submitted online. Okay, so again, we're coming towards the end, folks, and I do appreciate your patience as well as, again, all of that very valuable comments and questions. So I just want to inform everybody of their next steps, and this will be, again, another opportunity for you to provide any more input that you might have. Again, written comments will be received until 11:59 p.m. on Sunday, July the 12th, 2026, by email to consultation@townofstratford.ca or by calling the community hotline at 902-423-0649, extension 103. Planning Board will then meet for a discussion and make a recommendation to Council on July the 27th, 2026. Committee of the Whole will meet for discussion and make a recommendation to Council as well on Wednesday, July 29th, 2026. Town Council will meet on Wednesday, August the 12th, 2026, for a presentation of the adoption of the new official plan and that the zoning and development bylaw will be given its first reading. Town Council will then meet on September the 9th, 2026, and should that bylaw be given its first reading, there will be a further presentation of the zoning development bylaw and be given a second reading and eventual adoption. So that is all of our next steps. Again, you are not limited, if you made comments here tonight, to only your comments here tonight, of course. We would accept certainly, and we are soliciting any more feedback that you may have. I just want to thank everybody for your very respectful and very thoughtful comments. Again, this is not this council's document. It is certainly this town's document. And as you can tell from the many revisions that have happened, we certainly take your feedback seriously. We take that into account. We want to have a document that reflects both the views of the town now, but also it must be a forward-facing document, so we try to balance that as best we can. Thank you very much, folks, and I'll now adjourn these proceedings. Yeah.